Shri Krishna Parabrahmane Namaha. The scientific contributions are worthwhile in and around the universe. Science, sense, and spirituality together works. It never departs from each other. Whatever the science, it is called Vijnana. For science, it is needed of sense, Jnana. When Vijnana, Jnana adds, there that should be spirituality, mean Adhyatmika Jnana. In this way, science gives us a kind of knowledge to analyze the depth of information from any researched things. In this regard, today I took the topic of science, sense, and spirituality before you. Let us discuss in detail. Prayer. Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum. The scientific contributions all over the world till date reflect the amalgamation of inherent research aptitudes, religious bindings, and background social structure of scientists or researchers working in respective areas. Why a religion or a social structure would not sensitize and sway the senses of scientific research workers thereupon, telling greatly on the outcome at their behest through philosophical ideologies in theoretical or experimental constructions of scientific ladder. The DNA or RNA have mutatic nature right from viruses to humans, viroids to banyan trees, bacteria to elephants, yeast to orchards. That is where in nucleic acid lies a click and key for life's real hidden potencies for manifestations as human, virus, viroid, banyan, orchards, elephants, etc. These are speaking enough evidences which show the fingers of climate, nature, social structure, or religion, or inhabitants puppeting the diverse influence on all such manifestations related to life. Virus has a peculiar generation flow. The viral soul makes entry into a cell of the host, while the capsoid lies outside. The nucleic acid demonstrates its manifestations in each and every particle. It is a live demonstration of foreign soul entering into the host body, likened to the available examples in religious scriptures about the soul of humans entering into another human body. Science began after religion occupied the space in human skeleton pitched by cellular tissues. Religion made a man first spiritually excited, who later manifested as scientists, poets, seers, economists, industrialists, rulers, etc. There has been a considerable debate on the issue of relation and coexistence of science and religion Since long, but more recently, it gained momentum amongst top scientists, theologists, and philosophers. Science and theology are no longer seen as opposed but complementary, two aspects of one truth. A metaphysical theory can, it is true, be meaningful and useful. But if there is no means of testing its truth, there can be no empirical support for the truth. That's why it is non scientific or metaphysical by Popper's criterion. Now, the difference between science and intuition. Intuitions have led the scientists to win the big accolades in the world. Intuition is the nucleus of observations one makes. The intuition is driven by the senses one develops through religion or spirituality. Triggering phenomena of intuition are aroused by the spiritual experiences in life which are certainly governed by mortalities. The mortalities are inculcated through background. The scientific knowledge provides our best way of understanding the world. A painting is more than a collection of specks of paints, implying that science cannot account for the impact of a great painting on the viewer, nor can it, nor has anybody claimed that can. Perhaps it will never will, we cannot know. Some of us have that intuition. Some of us do not possess it. Nevertheless, intuition may be little fallible, and when it has to be compared with scientific approach, it has shown to be glittering image with a measured success. Scientists have intuitions about science. Others have intuitions about the existence of God. Intuitions can drive the scientists, philosophers, or artists to the new paradigmatic heights if they are conceived through spiritual senses. Let us know about religion in the genes. Religion can only gain from being investigated scientifically, involving genes linked to the potential for goodness. Societies in which this potential is actualized in a sizable proportion of its members will tend to function more harmoniously and more efficiently, so that natural selection will tend to favor the presence in human societies of genes of this type. Likewise, the malignancy in human life also has genes codes for this, and people attract like-minded people, forming cohesive groups through genetic expression phenotypically. Religious culture revolve around the discovery that there are certain subtle kinds of experience that tend to foster the unfolding of the potential for sense of goodness, and this constitutes the principal factor differentiating religion from humanism. Different religious cultures use different experiences and different ideas in pursuit of their common ends. Some take, for example, divinity as a central theme, while others focus instead on senses such as compassion and wisdom and on seeing reality clearly. Hinduism, Vedanta profess the sense of spirituality and to attain emancipation from the cycle of life. It emphasizes towards worldly matters and spirituality triggers the senses to the divinity, the absolute. We should appreciate nature's syntax as well as its grammar. Let us analyze biology of God. The existence of God is a question that has been answered in several ways by religious philosophers and by scientists. Science has its base in natural philosophy. The scope of science, by virtue of its method of study, is limited to the sensible universe. Theology, on the other hand, allows for a god or gods whose being, partly or wholly, lies outside the scope of the sensible universe. Given to this postulate, it is entirely reasonable to bring to bear philosophical reasoning that is not bound by the constraints of science. The question springs up: what have the teachings of God or gods as recounted in religious scriptures have to do with complexities and increases of molecular biology? In this context, it can be safely philosophized that what microbial cultures in a test tube are for a biologist, all the living creatures in the nature's bowl are cultured colonies for Almighty. God created this world with a harmonious blend of spiritual and earthly characteristics. Believers feel that this universe is based on forces of 100 tender balances, which amply demonstrates the very existence of God. The superpower. Predictably, one basic sense is not without the universe can exist without His will. One foremost and powerful example is that electromagnetic force, EMF, is 1039 times greater than the gravitational force. God, as a great scientist, first established several required exact balances between two to stabilize the universe in the present form. Biologically, God exists in all the living forms of DNA and its power to replicate. Virtuous to elephant and viroids to banyan tree, it is he, DNA, who exists in living beings all through. Hindu scriptures extols that God is omnipresent. Whenever we think the biologists speak high of DNA and genes. It is a great philosophy of Vedanta which expounds the spirituality, one and senses as a basic of human life, which are not the characteristics of any other life form on the earth. The heart of living beings is the heart, he art in divine senses. Science is naked without religious temperament or spiritual experience, which ultimately triggering intuitions in the hearts for making enormous inventions as Newton or C.V. Raman did. While other scientific temperament is necessary, spiritual development is an all important facet of life on the for all humans. Science is blind without religion, and similarly religion is lame without science. Both are together considered. Both these have to be complementary and not the two extremes. It is perhaps singular thought based on the experiences of one particular religion. The Vedantas espouse in the scriptures about the secret of spiritual powers which can create wonders. Once these are realized in toto. The magnificent epic compilation Gita, Lord Krishna's song, is one of the world's greatest literary works. The felicity of its verses, composed in the Anushtup Chanda, is more than matched by the philosophical profundity. The scientist is reported that the work ethic of Rhesus macaques was not all that different from that of many people. The significance of the experiment does not point towards an immediate chemical fix for inattentive students and loafing workers. Instead, it hints at a greater understanding of the physical mechanism of the networks involved in reward and addiction. In stark contrast, what makes a doctrine of Nishkamya Karma all the more remarkable is the fact that it was divided intuitively by the ancient sages of India, and which in turn led to a powerful method of modulating abhorrent or addictive behavior at the purely cognitive level. The Gita is one of the clearest and most comprehensive summaries of the members of the United Nations. Religion develops a sense, a spiritual power, leading to intuition to develop and progress. No retardations have any generation in any of the religions. The banishment by any legislation may not bear fruits. It is only that a good sense must prevail in each and every human being. To desist away from unethical sciences, let me put the things straight in emphatic manner that religious only increases human godness through spiritual senses. If it does otherwise, that is not accepted table in the science and humanity. One more venturous example of biologists working these days. After human genome was decoded 3 years ago, the scientists claimed that with this knowledge, it would be possible for humans to live for as long as 200 years or more. We have complete to know that there is no single master gene for eternal life. Markandeya of Indian mythology was blessed by Lord Krishna or Lord Shiva to be 60 years old forever. And the biblical patriarch apparently lived 969 years, while Markandeya can occur only with divine intervention. That therefore the forces of nature can face their everything in order to carrying particles and the phenomena. Are particles affected by them? The three interactions that govern the microcosmos are all much stronger than gravity and have been unified through the standard model. At the same time, it constitutes an important step in the endeavor to provide a unified description of all the three forces of nature, regardless of the spatial scale from the tiniest distances of the universe. The divine force is an infinite, where all the forces are unified. In essential, it remains to be invested that whether the microorganisms, more specifically viruses and bacteria, have any greater role to alter human thoughts, philosophy, and other religious works, to enhance goodness or create pathological variant in the form of demons, etc. There are viruses which enter other body quickly, are to be considered as most advanced organisms capable of making host body to dance as they would monitor the master molecule, the blueprint of life. The Adiguru Shankaracharya, the greater pages of the sage of the 9th century, had possessed the power to power body and thus lived. A part of life is in which he entered. The kings enter in the king's body and separately returned. The minutest are the greatest. The physicists have identified 4 forces in the universe, but in my opinion, they should add to it 5th force of DNA or microbes, and later there should be a supermost standard model to describe the smallest objects in nature. The spirituality has long been a powerful source to overcome stresses in life of human beings. There are millions of case histories who were cured of their chronic stress conditions through spiritual exercise, dhyana yoga. The greatest worry plagued him was of sustenance of the success he achieved and the possible future failures. He was worrying for nothing, but a fear psychosis infected him. He had a nervous breakdown with sleeplessness and unnecessary anxiety. The blood pressure was measured by doctor as 155 over 100 in another additional factor to worry for. He was ultimately diagnosed as manic depressive, which could be genetic but more fueled by stress. For the next few years, he ran on medicines, including he ran on tranquilizers, lithium carbonate to stabilize the manic depressive mood, and several other medicines. There were almost no longer for recovery because of the seriousness of the problem. The lithium therapy leaves no profit. To return to normalcy, life became a mess. Some of his employees talked to him to seek solace at the feet of Lord Krishna. In conclusion, a hypothesis can be derived that nucleic acid, the master molecule of all living beings, objects has vital role without which there cannot be existence of any life. There are many scientific enigmas which still remain mystery, and there are several lacunae in religion that can never be considered a religion epithet whatsoever. The great sages are therefore transmitted through microorganisms. They can also serve as the reservoirs of the universal information which enabled be transmitted to the specific organisms at the proper space and time. This is the theory of biological relativity. This research aspect indicates the life after death and probably the mode of transmission of the messages of previous life to the next life. These aspects may be researched out completely tomorrow. The days may bring many new informations, discoveries, but the spirituality will never change. It will remain as absolute truth as life and death. Life is precious. With several pursuits and people involved, life is the culmination of the past, present, and the future, which redefines the existence of humanity. The most pertinent characteristic of the life is to have a purpose. Meaningless left can significantly contribute to causing anxiety, depression, and phobias, ultimately turning in major psychological ailments such as existential anxiety. This is when the concept of spirituality becomes most relevant. Spirituality is often misunderstood, especially by the younger. It is usually a fat, smiling Buddha sitting with crossed legs, or an old sage sitting and meditating at the top of a hill. While these images may be representation of a particular section of people who have associated themselves with these profound practice of wellness, and does not make me to permit it. Spirituality is for everyone. It is a pathway to gaining perspective way of life. It recognizes the fact that human life is much more than what they to do every day or plan to do in future. It defines social dependency on material things and helps us to comprehend the greater purpose of life. Spirituality invokes a higher form of cognition and intelligence that transcends the reality of the time which runs the universe. It advocates more profound sense of human thirst for peace, truth, and tranquility. An interesting feat about spirituality is that it is not dependent on religion. One can be spiritual and yet not religious. Spirituality has a much broader spectrum and schools of the thought. It is very bigger to understand the universal human experience, something that touches us all at some level. Thus, the human race will wait for that confluence. Shreyakantaaya Kalyana Nidaya Nidayadinam Shri Venkata Nivasaya Srinivasaya Mangalam Mangalasasnavare Madacharya Purogamaihi Sarvaisha Purvairacharya Sarvutayastu Mangalam.